tell us, please, thinking of your career back in your starting days, what do you feel was your greatest challenge facing, the difficulties in breaking the ceiling, the glass ceiling as a woman leader in Latin America? I think the two aspects here is being a female and in Latin America, just to contrast also with other women we are going to be talking to for this series.
Yeah, for sure. I think that ironically, the toughest moment for me was actually later on in the career. So it took me a very long time to either identify that I had some kind of a disadvantage, maybe just a lack of awareness on my side of, not picking up on the signals, not really being tuned in that this could actually be happening and part of my reality. So I would say that the toughest moment for me was about 5 to 6 years ago when I entered the financial services space. And I had never worked in financial services. I had never worked in a bank. I knew nothing about that life. And I decided to join what was one of the first digital banks in Brazil. So the bank didn't exist. It was being created from scratch. And I was invited exactly because I was not from the banking industry, right? So what the leaders wanted, the investors wanted, was somebody that was going to bring a very fresh perspective. And from my point of view, I said, wow, this is an amazing opportunity, right? How many times in your life are you actually invited to build a bank from scratch? So I took this challenge. I knew that it was going to be extremely difficult from a technical perspective, because even though I dominated 100% all of the digital aspects of the job, there was so much of the actual, vertical banking. We had to create a checking account, a savings account, investment accounts, all of the systems. So we had to create the ATM system. We had to create the customer support. I mean, literally imagine what is a bank, even a simplified digital fintech-like bank, and all of the complexities that go into that. However, I highly underestimated the cultural challenge. So, I knew that it was going to be different from most of the, e-commerce or startup environments that I had worked in before, but I had no idea how difficult and how different it was going to be. So I think some of the things that I faced there, and obviously were learnings and helped me get to where I am now. I was the only female on the board, right? At the director level. I was the only, maybe almost the only person under 55 or 60. And I was the only person that had never worked in a bank in her life. So you can imagine what the environment was, sitting in that board meeting with the very traditional banking environment, that long table and everybody wearing their coats and ties, and being the only female in the room. And not even, for the first year, I half of what was spoken there to me was new. So it was like I was listening and I was making notes and I was researching. So it was a moment where I realized that all of the stories that I had heard or read about, that there really is bias and that women really are treated differently at these levels. It was the moment that I realized that that was true. And to be honest, maybe before that moment, if you had asked me, my approach to this question would have been completely different. It would have been, no, I think that you just have to work hard. I think that you just have to know what you're doing. A lot of this is blah, 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 is women complaining. And today I realized that actually I probably did suffer from this before, but my mindset wasn't set on it. So I wasn't picking up on the signals, but most importantly, maybe it was at a much lower degree. So the combination of not picking up on the signals and having it be something much less aggressive and not so extreme made me live oblivious to this for many years. So that was for sure the toughest moment. It was a maybe 2-year cycle until I got that group to trust me, to empower me, and to really, suck it up. At the end of the day, it was like, guys, I know you're trying to get rid of me, but it's not working and I'm not going anywhere. So you kind of don't have a choice. You either learn to live with me, or, you know, we're just going to have to fight all the time. And I think that there was also another aspect that made it very hard was I had the sexy part of building the bank. So I had all of the digital part. I had all of the client facing parts of the bank. While obviously we know that for a bank to work, there's a ton of back end that needs to happen, a ton of back office, but that wasn't my responsibility. That was somebody else's responsibility. So a combination, a little bit of also, you know, I don't want to say envy because that's such a strong word, but it's almost like, wait, you're the weird one. And you were blessed with the most fun part of this job. And I'm the one that's supposed to be super experienced, super senior, and I'm still stuck doing the old school. So it was a super interesting combination of many factors. What did I learn? I learned basically to work harder. So I studied a lot. I tried to leapfrog all of the learning that they had from years in financial industry and learn as quickly as possible. But maybe the most important part, because I think this is general, women always do that, right? Like I think we go 10 degrees in depth more than the average male, just because we know that we're going to be more criticized, we're going to be more challenged, and we want to be ready for it. But I think that what was the most powerful learning there was how to create alliances and understanding that alliances don't only have to be built with other females. I mean, obviously, if you have a female that's going to share a seat with you at the table, it's so much easier to create that alliance and, you know, interrupt the famous mansplaining moment. But when you don't, which was my case, I really had to identify in that group of people, who are the people that I can trust and who are the people that I can really connect with before going into these situations. And that ended up happening with two of the other directors. And we are actually partners today in several other things. But it took me forever to understand that I had to approach it in that way. Like I had to be able to sit and have a very open conversation with these men and say, listen, this is happening to me. And I need your help. Like, I'm not going to survive if you don't help me. And obviously you might ask for that help and you might get a reply like, you're crazy. This isn't happening to you. And you're totally insane. Which did happen until I found the two people that actually identified with what I was saying. And once those alliances were built, I think the other very important part was really surgically analyzing the personalities, right? Instead of just lumping it all together like, oh my God, all of these men are crazy, was really just going one by one, understanding, you know, who is this person? What is their background? What is the moment in their life that they're going through right now? What about my existence can actually be challenging them or making them feel vulnerable? And how can I also change my behavior to not cause that reaction? Because at the end of the day, you know, many times we end up being so reactive or so aggressive that you are actually causing a lot of the reactions that come in your direction, right? With that attitude. So it was a project, and I had like a timeline, and I had commitments that I set with myself around, all right, you're going to have lunch by yourself with two of these people per week and individually, not like, oh, let's go out everybody for a group lunch. That gave me the moment to connect. That gave me the moment to have maybe a personal connection, which when things get really tough, it's always great if you can throw in you know, hey, how's your daughter? Is she doing okay? Like, remember, I am your daughter in the future. So be careful the way that you're speaking to me. And all of this at the end, you know, at the end of this trajectory, I left the bank and they all begged me to stay, each one in their own way. But I would say that it was a successful turn of events. And from that moment on, my attitude as a feminist and doing these kinds of conversations and really just becoming an activist changed entirely, right? I understood that this was also part of my job. And this was also part of my role as a leader, is just increasing awareness and being very transparent, which Tachi, you know, is always my style and my way of being, sometimes too much. But from my point of view, the glass ceiling was broken at that moment in time. So I think it was a success story at the end.
And Claudia, because you mentioned some people and some conversations, important conversations that you had, did you have someone impacting in shaping your career trajectory? Did you have this figure, or maybe 2 or 3 persons that helped you on building that?
So I think 2 things, and again, very late on the career, not in the beginning, like the same window of time, 5-6 years ago. I did have a coach that actually lasted as a coach for maybe 6 months, and we became best friends, and we're still best friends till this day. But I think most importantly, what I feel that I had was one of these people who I created a very strong connection with at the bank. Is a great friend, and I feel like it was the first person that really understood me, like understood my way of thinking, understood my way of acting, because this aspect of my personality, which is super informal, really shocks people when you're at a very senior level, right? I don't have my glasses here with me. I don't know where they are, but I've recently stopped being able to see up close, and I was losing like 3 glasses a day. And I finally went into Amazon and I bought a 25 glasses pack of reading glasses, and they're each one a different color. So there's like hot pink, hot blue, yellow, and I just have them around the house. And I just, every time I have these, a different one on, and my HR manager at the company now, she says, nothing tells people that you are a real person than the fact that you don't care that you're wearing hot pink glasses and you're entering an all hands to talk to 1,000 employees. And this is different, right? Normally people that are CEOs of big companies, that are especially of like multinational, very, even though innovative, but very organized in what your behavior should be. People, when they interact with a senior leader, they expect something. They expect formality. They expect barriers. They expect to feel nervous. So the reason I was late for our chat today was the person I was interviewing overslept, and he was late for the interview. And I just connected to the Zoom, and I just sat there waiting. I was reading emails. I was doing other things I didn't even really notice. And he came in like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he was super honest. He said, I'm not going to lie to you. I overslept. And I said, that's okay. Do you want to take a minute? Do you want to go have a coffee, drink some water? And he said, yes. I said, okay, so reconnect in 5 minutes. And our interview started 5 minutes later with him saying, I would have never expected that from the CEO of this company. I would have expected the person to have dropped. I would have expected the person to have sent me like a nasty note, like, I'm waiting and where are you? So going back to my sponsor, I think this person really understood me and understood that this was my unique selling proposition, right? And this is what made me me. And actually, he changed his way of acting after interacting with me a lot as well. But he was somebody that has referred me. He is somebody that has referred me to a million things. So literally, when I left the bank and I went to lead Web Motors, which was part of the Santander family, he was the one that literally said, hire this person. And he's done that several times before. Be it for board seats, be it for advisor seats, be it for even employment opportunities. He is somebody that, I have grown super comfortable to discussing details, like, these are the terms. Do you think that this salary is right? And we've had conversations in the past where I have actually gone to sit in a position that he was seated in before. And we've openly had the conversation where he's like, why are they offering you 30% less than what I made in that position? You're going to have the exact same job description, the exact same job profile. And that has empowered me to go back and say, hey guys, are you sure you're making me the right offer? So I'm super grateful that I had that. And I do think, Tatyana, to be fair, that this is important for both men and women, right? I think everybody has their career sponsors. This is how you take the big leaps, be it in our relationship. us as headhunter and candidate, that we've grown to really know each other and trust each other, that can be your nudge to take a leap or to be seen for a position that many times you traditionally wouldn't be seen for. And I think that that's very true for all genders and all, ethnicities and every combination we can think of. The difference is that it's a lot easier for women to connect with women. Since there are fewer women at the top, it's harder for you to find that sponsor. And it's very rare, at least in my life experience, for a peer that is a male to decide to empower you as a female. What I traditionally live is competition on this front. And then that's when the race gets really hard, right? Because you're competing with somebody that probably already has their sponsor, because the boys club is super consolidated, and the soccer games and the golfing and the while the moms are rushing home to have dinner with the kids and don't have that networking as consolidated. So when you enter a competition where the male has a sponsor and the female doesn't, chances are we're going to lose, right? And that's the tough part. So super grateful. I think the coaching was extremely important. I am a person that has done lots of different kinds of therapies in my life. I've had several different therapists with different, styles and methodologies. But the coaching for me was something that, from the professional aspect, was much more effective, because it's not so much about, going to the past or over analyzing. It's almost about under analyzing and just being very pragmatic about, where do you want to go? How long do you want to get there? What are the things that you think are keeping you from doing that? And coming up with a very clear plan. So I think a lot of people do have the bias of, therapy, we still live a bias of mental health. And especially for those people, I think coaching is a great alternative, because it's a completely different methodology. It's a completely different approach to the same problem, but very practical, which ends up working for people that are used to being in big companies, working with KPIs and everything that's, our very goal-oriented day-to-day. It connects better, at least for me. That was my personal experience there.
I have two questions for you. In your role today, what actions is your organization taking to promote greater inclusion for women? Thinking of your role today in the organization you were in, what can you share with us about it?
I'm very new to my current role, so I'm going to blend a little bit of what I did in my previous role and the one that I have now. I think in my previous role, I had the luxury of being in a company that already had a lot of the pillars in place. So the ERGs, the employee resource groups, were in place. There was already a head of D&I in the company, like Tatyana, that was really responsible to look at this from a strategic point of view. And there, having at least those tools in place, it was a lot easier to take the next step. And basically there were three main things that we did. The first one was understanding that D&I is not something that you can only do from the door in. So especially in a company like Uber, which was the company I worked at before, your ecosystem is huge, right? I mean, you have a ton of employees. You have literally in Brazil, millions of drivers and delivery people. You have millions of restaurants connected to the platform. So it's not enough to do something that you're only looking at your employees. You have to look at the entire ecosystem and everything that is part of you delivering your magical experience, delivering your amazing service. And the third thing, so really, having those three pillars: employees, ecosystem, and the third pillar was just society as a whole. So I felt very strongly that a company that large had a larger responsibility than just doing things that were to benefit ourselves, right? Because if you're improving diversity in your working environment, you're improving your productivity, you're improving your employee NPS. If you're improving your ecosystem, theoretically, you're improving the quality of your services. But how do you truly give back just to the world, literally, and the community that you're inserted in. So I think that was the first step, was really understanding how far we wanted to go with this. For each of those pillars, setting very, very clear projects and goals with KPIs, with timelines, with full transparency. So I see this still as a very big barrier. I interact with a lot of executives that still have a very hard time committing to, hey, this is my diversity goal, and this is where I want to get. This is where I am today. Even if today is terrible, this is where I want to get in 5 years. There's still a lot of taboo there about being very transparent with these numbers. So basically, from the employee point of view, there were three main actions that had a ton of results and very simple to implement. One, in the recruiting process, making sure that you don't get up, and then you can decide to what level of seniority you want to do this. We implemented it manager up, including manager, for you to, as a recruiter and as a hiring manager, for you to get to the final step in your recruiting process, you had to have the same amount of candidates for each gender. So if you had 2 finalists, it had to be 1 male, 1 female. If you had 4 finalists, 2 females, 2 males. And like that, magically, the numbers started changing, right? Obviously, the processes took longer. Obviously, hiring managers in many situations were freaking out, like, I need this person, my team is falling apart. And you really had to hold that pressure and make sure that you had the commitment from everybody in the value chain. But that way you solved the new members joining, right? Every new person joining the company, you knew, had gone through a very scrutinous process of parity, which doesn't mean that you won't end up hiring more men, but at least you gave women a very clear equal opportunity there. Still on the recruiting front, was guaranteeing all of our processes were done with cases. So the last step was you had to present a case, and the case you usually presented to a panel. Was making sure that there was always a woman on the panel. And if the candidate was a female, making sure the panel was more biased towards females than males. So either equal, 2 women, 2 men, or if there were only 3 people on the panel, if the candidate was a female, 2 women and 1 man. Those things from a recruiting perspective for my team. So interesting stats on my team, I inherited it with 80% men. And when I recently just left, it was 100% female. So we had the opposite problem. It was like, okay, guys, we need to start hiring some men because there's too many women on this leadership team. So this works. What I'm telling you actually worked. So that was the recruiting part. The internal part that we implemented a no woman left behind policy and started looking at what our promoting process looked like initially. So like most companies, the promoting process basically is comprised of 3 different moments, right? Moment 1 is eligibility. Have you been in your role long enough, whatever the company's mobility, rule is? Have you been in your role long enough to make you eligible to be promoted? And that's a very, mathematical. HR can go into the Workday or whatever tool and extract a list of people that are eligible. The next step is the nomination. So given those people that are eligible, who are we going to nominate for a promotion? And the step 3 is actually the calibration or the debate that usually happens with several leaders in the room. Who are we actually going to promote? What we realized was that I'll start backwards. At the final calibration and the choice, always by definition, and I think this is very common in most companies, you have a people and culture person in the room, right? You normally have your HRBP that supports that area that's in the room and is participating in that moment. And that kept us honest. So that person, when we were discussing, always asked the question, guys, are we having any unbiased, are we being biased towards gender? Are we being biased towards ethnicity or any other bias? Are we being biased because we want to promote people that behave like us? So the presence of the HRBP made that last step be a step with a much higher level of awareness. So in general terms, at that moment, I can say that there was very little bias. However, what we identified was that between eligibility and nomination, that's where the gap was. So more men were being nominated to be promoted than women, which if you look at it just from a statistics perspective, okay, we have more men in the company. It might make more sense it might not be a problem that I have more men being nominated because we have more men in the company. However, what we identified was that there was no consistency between performance and nomination. So I had more men being nominated, regardless of the fact that in the previous performance cycle, I had women that outperformed those men. So whatever methodology you use, be it a 9-in-box, be it a forced bell curve, I mean, whatever it is, in some way, shape, or form, at the end of that exercise, you create some kind of a ranking, right? It's terrible to say, but it just is reality. And what we noticed was that the nominations weren't respecting the ranking. So a very, very, very simple fix was when we entered performance cycle, we entered the moment of nomination. I would literally send an email to all of the managers saying, guys, I'd like to remind you of the output of our last performance cycle. These were the people that were in the 9-box. These were the people that were in the 8-box. These were the people that, and just with that, we created a forced step where these managers had to make a pause and say, oh, wait a minute. If I am going to nominate Tachi and she is in the 8-box, no, if I'm going to nominate João and he is in the 8-box and Tachi is in the 9-box and she does the same role as João does, I need to be really prepared to defend João. And usually there was no concrete reason to defend João. And just with that, we ended up getting to parity at the nomination level. And then the calibration level already followed, you know, without biases. So all of a sudden we start seeing the same amount of women being promoted as men, which then instantaneously create another problem because we didn't have the bench. So, you know, you're recruiting at the high level with parity. So you're bringing women in, you're promoting internally with parity. So you're pushing women up, but we hadn't changed the lower level recruiting to create this bench to make sure that as I pulled these women up, I had women to fill their manager roles. You know, what's the use of you promoting a female manager into a female director if you don't have another female, you know, analyst or coordinator to put in that manager's role? So then we started, you know, attacking that part of the funnel. The most effective tool there was we did something called Power Hour, and literally we would all connect or, you know, join in a room for an hour. We did this depending on the need. We do it every month. We did it every 2 months. Every employee had to connect to Power Hour and they had to at least refer one female. And then we went on to do this for ethnicity and for all of our underrepresented groups, but it started with females. And with that, we created a huge internal database of referrals. I mean, did they have cultural fit? Were they, you know, appropriate for that role or not? It didn't matter. At that moment, it was, you are an employee of this company. You know what this company stands for. And I am absolutely positive that you can think of at least one person in your network to refer that has to do with this company. Forget seniority, forget what the role is, forget capabilities, think of only cultural fit. And with that, we created this massive database that then we did count with external partners to help us sift through that, right? So somebody needed to now get those 5,000 names and actually approach these candidates and identify if they really did have cultural fit and for which areas were they mostly, you know, were they mostly equipped to work in. In general terms, you know, we hired smart, great problem solvers. So it really doesn't matter whether you know, studied engineering, marketing, or economics in college or in business school, or if you went to law school. Like, what we really wanted were just to identify, especially at the low level, you want ambitious, smart, people that really want to innovate and do things differently. So these external partners sorted through these lists, classified them into groups, and then that started feeding into our normal recruiting process. So every time we had an open position, wait a minute, let's tap into this candidate pool. And that was the priority, was starting with that candidate pool. An interesting learning that when we go into the other underrepresented groups, and also female, but more the other groups, we also learned that we had a ton of talent internally. And because of all of the challenges that we have with privacy and discrimination, of really having a tough time with self-ID, and really knowing what your population looks like, we also discovered that there was an opportunity within the company to know better who our employees were, and to ensure that we were seeing them holistically, right? Not only, oh, this person is the analyst for operations in the north of Brazil. No, come on. Who is this person? What are their, what do they stand for? What do they want to do? What do they want to do with their next step in life? And we were actually very successful through a self-ID survey that was not mandatory. It was done within all of the boundaries of privacy and discrimination. And we were able to collect a lot of data about the people that were already within our company. And that ended up being another strong tool to fuel into these recruiting efforts. So I think those were the two learnings there. The other two pillars, I won't go into as many detail, but we did amazing projects. So for the ecosystem with restaurant owners and drivers, we launched a series of tech functionalities for female drivers that they could actually turn on a button on their app saying, I only want to pick up female passengers. So we gave them that power to not be scared to drive at night. We also built a huge financial empowerment platform, financial education, because we identified that there was a very strong connection between empowering these women and the increase in domestic violence within their household. So it was a catch-22. If I empower you to make money and to have your independence, I'm putting you, and many times, in danger in your own household. And that really connected to the third pillar that we chose to embrace. So the pillar of giving back to the community, giving back to society, was the fight against domestic violence. We committed multiple millions of dollars to NGOs in that front. And then it all tied together, right? At the end, you're committing to domestic violence because you want to be able to empower women to be more independent and to be financially stable on their own, but you have to take care of the third pillar. And obviously that comes back to the office too, for you to have a more diverse environment. So I from my point of view, it was a super gratifying exercise. And what made it so gratifying was that the three pillars connected. So it was something that was much greater than, oh, I want to have a 50-50 leadership team because I read some McKinsey research that says that my company will be more productive. It really went deep into what people believed in, and what are the changes that we want to see in our community, and what is our role as a company to do that. Oh, and by the way, our recruiting process is totally biased, so let's fix it, right? Many times I think the approach is the other way around, and when people don't buy into what is the true cause, it's harder. I mean, you can create a policy, everybody will follow the policy, but if you're then you have to be a lot bolder, right? Because if you're only going to connect with people through the policy, you have to be willing to be super strict and super top down, like this is the policy, and from now on everything will work this way, which at least in my personal experience, I've seen companies very hesitant to do. So I think that the more you can bring in this connection with where are the roots of our company and how does this connect, the more successful you'll be. 30 seconds on my new venture and the team that I'm now building. The approach here has been very different. So I've been very unorthodox about the people that I have brought in. I think as a recruiter and somebody who's super experienced in this space, if I sent you the resumes, you might look and be like, did you really hire this person? Because we are in a turnaround story and we need people that are going to be 90% culture and energy and dedication and 10% technical expertise, right? I mean, maybe I exaggerated in that distribution, but I'm not in a position just to hire amazing executives. I'm in a position to hire people that have struggled, people that have, founded their companies and had to close them down because they understand what is required in the moment that you are revamping, in the moment that you are re-energizing, in the moment that you are looking at your company and saying, this is great, I want to keep, this is terrible, I want to throw it away. So I haven't actually officially started any D&I initiatives, but ironically, we have 2 gay men in our C-level. We have 4 women in our C-level. So through this very unorthodox way and approach, we've been, able to create a super heterogeneous group, but because the focus has been different. And then now I think it'll be easier, right? The minute that you have a C-level that's composed of people with all different kinds of life experiences and that represent all different kinds of groups, cascading that down will hopefully be an easier challenge. And obviously with all of the learning that I acquired, I think having like the practical process-oriented view already, like check, I know how to do this, I think makes the rest also a lot easier.
Yeah, it comes naturally, right? It's a reflection of what you already have there. So last piece here, Claudia, it's been super insightful as usually, but what advice do you have to the next generation of Latin American women leaders? If you could give these ladies an advice, what would that be?
Be vocal. I remember the day that I did an interview for one of the biggest magazines in Brazil, business magazines, and they asked me the question similar to our first question around, have you ever suffered harassment, And I was very truthful and very honest. And when that magazine issue came out, my life was tough, right? My WhatsApp was all over the place. That is not what happened. How could you be so vocal? How could you share your story? And I had a hard time. I went into this spiral of, did I do the right thing? Like, was it fair? Did I exaggerate? Was my point of view, incorrect? And I kept going back and forth on this ethical dilemma of what is the right thing to do. And I went back and read the article and reflected on my story. And I said, wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong. This article is actually telling my point of view and how I felt. It's not accusatory. It's not a compliance ticket. It's not individually targeted, but it is sharing my story and it is sharing how I felt. What did I do to get out of that terrible place that I found myself, which is the story we spoke of earlier today. And from that moment on, I realized that I have to talk about it. And the people that feel uncomfortable reading that article, they are feeling uncomfortable because somehow they were part of that story and they know that what they're reading there somehow reflects on their behavior. So I think that's my advice. Obviously, it's a super personal decision. How you do it is up to you. You can do it in very discreet ways, mentoring other women, but sharing that you have been through that moment. I think that that's the power, right? The minute that you say, this happened to me, and people look at you already in a successful position, like, oh, wow, you're so important, you're so powerful. And suddenly they hear this person that they admire saying, I've suffered this. And yes, I've cried in the bathroom for 6 months in a row. And I have had somebody say, can you wear pants tomorrow? Because I can't concentrate while you're wearing that skirt. it's so powerful for the younger generations to understand that they're not crazy when they feel that way, that they don't have to suffer in silence, that they can ask for help, and that they're not weak. So I think that the instinctive reaction in these moments is for us to look in the mirror and say, what did I do wrong? The day after this skirt exercise, I woke up to get dressed to go to work. This episode with the skirt that I heard this comment, I woke up to go to work and I instinctively pulled out pants from my closet. And I found myself being like, wait, am I really going to wear pants because that idiot said that to me yesterday? No, I'm going to wear, and from that moment on, I think I worked in a skirt for a year. I went to the mall. I've never really been, I've always been like a jeans and sneakers kind of person. I went to the mall. I bought like a whole new wardrobe full of skirts. And that became part of my mission, right? No, I'm not going to wear pants just because some idiot felt it was appropriate to make that comment. So I think telling the story and sharing and demonstrating that, yes, you were once vulnerable, and that, yes, there are things that we always have to reflect about our own behavior, because no, we're always part of a situation, and a situation is always a combination of everybody's behavior. So yes, we have a role, but yes, sometimes we are victims and we didn't ask for that. And our skirt wasn't a mini skirt and inappropriate. So I think we have to talk about it. And I don't think we need to be shy, and I don't think we need to be afraid. I think we need to just really come together. And, you know, some of us might be more comfortable talking about it only among women. Great. Talk about it among young women and share your story. Mentor them individually, write an anonymous blog post. I mean, however you want to be vocal about this, but we have to be vocal. And it doesn't have to be, you know, hashtag whistleblower. It can just be, I'm telling my story, and this is what happened to me, and this is how I overcame it. And the more we do that, I think the more the younger generations will just understand that hopefully their life will be easier. But if it's not, it's okay. Like they have resources and they have people that they can rely on to help them get through it. So that's it's hard to give advice, right? I'm usually not, I usually reflect more on my personal experiences than giving advice, but if I had to choose one, that would most certainly be it.